Okay, welcome, Karen. Lovely to see you. Thanks for partaking in the podcast. It's great to have you here. How are you doing
Thank
this morning?
you. I'm doing well, thank you. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Brilliant. So we've known each other for maybe 8 or 9 years now.
Yeah.
I've teacher trained with you through Mindfulness UK, which you are the founder. And you've been my main supervisor since. And you've also partaken in an event that I helped organise through my role with the Association for the Study of Medical Education, ASME, as well. And you've always been supportive and kind, and I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
Just in case listeners are curious, we share the same surname, but as far as we know, we are not related.
No.
But just to say a little bit about the podcast today, we're going to explore your teaching practice, Karen, how you guide, teach, hold space for others, your pedagogy, if you like, and look at some of the methods, the challenges, the inspirations, and also have a wider view on the evolving landscape of
Mm.
mindfulness education, if you like.
Mm.
And I'm hoping your wisdom and experience will be inspiration for those who teach or wish to teach mindfulness and
Mm.
meditation.
Thank you. We'll see.
Yeah.
Mm.
So just a bit of a warm-up question. What's one thing bringing you joy right now?
My garden, absolutely love my garden at the moment. It is so full of colour. And yeah, I'm a very keen gardener and I just go out there every day and love it.
Super. Brilliant. So we're going to go into the first part of the podcast and to start to explore a little bit about your own journey, the human story behind how you came to mindfulness. So let's start at the beginning. What originally brought you to mindfulness meditation?
Yeah, I mean, as for many people, there was a pathway. I didn't sort of go from one thing straight into mindfulness. And the main driver for me to start meditating in the first place was I had a quite a dysfunctional upbringing. And when I did a nursing degree, but when I came to work with the nurses who became really firm friends of mine, I started to recognize how actually my nervous system was a little dysregulated. So obviously I didn't really use that phrase, but I recognized that I was a little reactive and very protective of myself and all sorts of different kind of behaviors, I suppose. And I hadn't really recognized that fully about myself before. So I started to look into it a little bit. I had always been quite interested in the mind body relationship. I remember hypnotizing myself when I was about 13, 14, just for fun. So yeah, I started looking around and started practicing yoga. Yoga was my in, and the reason for that I really clearly see now is the movement really helped to regulate my nervous system. And from there, I had the most amazing, beautiful teacher who was so full of kindness, compassion, and wisdom. And her name was Wendy, and of course we had to call her Bendy Wendy. So thanks to Bendy Wendy, she really opened my eyes to another way of being and feeling in my body. And so, yeah, from there came lots of meditation practice and yeah, sort of started me on my way really.
Amazing. What surprised you most when you first started practicing?
It was the difference it made so quickly and how I could go in feeling relatively sort of on edge, I suppose, a bit nervous. Who's going to be in the class and, what's it going to be like? What are we doing today? And then within like a minute or two of doing some practice, whether it was the nidra, yoga nidra or relaxation or just starting to move, my body just went, "Oh, this is, I've come home." I really had that feeling of coming home to myself and I still do. I still have that feeling whenever I start a meditation practice or do my yoga. It's just phenomenal. Yeah.
What would you say that this phrase means to you? The coming home to yourself, for somebody who maybe hasn't practiced much or
Yeah.
doesn't phrase that experience in that way. How would you describe that? Would you say?
I mean, I think it's an overly used phrase, but I did feel very grounded and earthed and connected. So connected to myself on each level, and it felt in balance. So my because my nervous system was able to calm down, it then felt like it really opened some doors to other experiences within my body. There's, oh, yeah, my hands are really quite cool, or yeah, I can feel that fluttering in my chest, or and then within a minute or so of practice, because I had that open awareness, I could a sense that it was really starting to soften, and I felt really soothed, like a balm, really. And not only was I connected to myself, but then it's like a miracle in some ways. I opened my eyes to other people and sort of saw them as, everybody's struggling, and we're here all here for a reason. And it just put me on a different plane. Yeah. And the awareness is just really key for me, and the awareness that it brought for myself in the moment, and how by calming my nervous system, it opened up so many other channels of awareness.
Mhm.
Mm. Yeah.
That's great. So how would you define mindfulness in your own words?
Yeah, it's just so many definitions out there. But for me, I think, my personal experience was through starting to become aware of my patterns of thought and how that mapped across to my behavior and the way that I spoke to myself internally. I recognized really clearly that by dropping into the present moment, it gave me an opportunity to draw a line between maybe what had happened in the past, how I had been, and in situations, and how I could actually sort of refresh myself and start again. So a real recognition of what had gone on and how that informs me as I am. By dropping the present moment creates the line, and then that makes it spacious, and it offers me choice. I can carry on with that pattern, and I see those patterns coming in. They feel very ingrained, but that not being reactive and being responsive, I think that for me that was the most important aspect of mindfulness in my life, was to recognize that reactivity within me, give myself time and space, and then respond, and that felt really empowering. That's a long definition, but that's my experience.
So would you frame that as a way of being in some way, or a set of skills that you've developed,
Yeah.
practice, or something else,
Yeah, it
evolved?
feels somewhat deeper than that. It feels kind of cellular in nature, is that the more I changed my path and became more and more aware and learnt the skills and tools of calming my nervous system. Definitely the more it became a way of being, but not on a superficial level, on a really deep level. And, just totally altering my direction of travel.
Mhm. That's amazing.
Mm.
How has your personal practice evolved over time then?
So I started with yoga, and I did a lot of pranayama practice, breath work, which was sort of breath retention and alternate nostril breathing, all sorts of things. And found them very beneficial, but I also found them quite complex. And now in retrospect, I recognize that that's because of my heightened nervous system. And so I was looking for a more simplistic, if you like, way of practice. And so mindfulness really offered that opportunity to be with whatever is here in the moment is okay. And that feeling of being okay with what's here in the moment really changed my perspective on how I was, and my practice. So that's what led me to mindfulness. Then through that, I started investigating Buddhism, and I happened to marry a man who then became a Buddhist and a Buddhist teacher. And so Buddhism became a sort of interweave into my life. And then I was always practicing my yoga, but what Buddhism gave me was context. So context for some of what I was practicing and feeling, along with the yoga philosophy as well. And so now I come to my yoga practice, which is still my foundational practice for sure, but with much more of an awareness of the context and sort of if you like, the theory. So the education piece is there, which helps me to stay very engaged with my practice. And so, yeah, I kind of feel like I've gone full circle in some respects, but I feel much more informed and knowledgeable about my practice in a more wholesome kind of a way. So, yeah, it's a lovely experience to have gone through all of that and sort of know contextually and philosophically why I'm doing what I'm doing when I'm practicing.
And were there any periods where practice felt especially challenging?
Yeah, I mean, there was a really pivotal moment in my life where I had been practicing meditation and yoga for um, in excess of 20 years, and I experienced cancer for the first time. And I really remember sitting with my practice and my mindfulness practice, but I was going for an operation relatively soon, and not knowing what they were going to find, having signed a document to say that, just take anything out that you need to, and actually recognizing in my middle of my practice that I might not survive this. And so the reality of the situation was really strong. But what I recognize so powerfully is that I didn't know what to do with that. And so
Mm.
it came to me in that meditation that my levels of compassion for self-compassion, self-kindness were quite low. And again, that's from my background. And so I recognized that, yes, it was out of balance. So the reality was there, but I didn't know where to go with that. So I started reading lots of books and podcasts and all sorts of TED Talks and one thing and another, and really immersed myself in compassion, self-compassion. And it was hard, really hard to do. It made me feel so uncomfortable on lots of different levels. But I knew from my meditation practice, the word practice is there because you have to keep going with it, that you could break through and that you can come to a resolution and the deeper understanding. And that's exactly where I got to with my compassion practices. And it feels now, it took some years to start to get some balance, but I feel extremely imbalanced, in as in within balance, and with my mindfulness and compassion. And yeah, it was a really pivotal time in my life.
Mhm. I imagine that has really strengthened your practice,
Mm.
but also it really helped you understand how important mindfulness is
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah, it really did. And then, unfortunately, 10 years later, I celebrated 10 years of not having cancer, and then I got it again in a very a different place, different cancer. And I approached it totally differently. And that was because of the blend of self-compassion with mindfulness that helped me to stay much steadier, much calmer, taking it a step at a time, knowing that I had the tools and skills as I was sitting in the waiting room to go and see my consultant, or having a CT scan and having the surgery and other treatment that I had. It was an absolutely, totally and utterly different experience. I'd rather not have had it, but it really put mindfulness and compassion and the absolute benefits of it to the test. It was amazing. So,
Mm.
yeah.
It's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that and being
Mm,
honest and open about it.
it's okay.
And that obviously influences what you do. Would you like to
Yeah.
say a little bit about how that's influencing what you do with mindfulness?
Yeah. Having set up Mindfulness UK in 2010, and I had been teaching mindfulness and compassion within my healthcare role for about 15 years, I suppose, before that. But I recognized that the mindfulness aspect was starting to come through from the clinical world into mainstream, but there was no mention of the word compassion. And because I'd been working with both myself and with patients where they had really experienced a lot of trauma and abuse, and a pain consultant, so I was on a pain management team, working with mindfulness and compassion together, really recognizing the power of them both, and seeing that that wasn't being translated into the mainstream, what was sort of more university led mindfulness teaching and training. And so I set about redressing the balance. And actually, I do remember when I was writing my first book, Compassionate Mindful Inquiry in Therapeutic Practice, I developed a model that showed the relationship between mindfulness and compassion. And I remember taking it to my supervisor, who was very immersed in the mindfulness world, but had also started teaching a lot of compassion. And she said to me, "Oh, the establishment won't like this, that you are introducing compassion into mindfulness." And I just said, "Well, I really don't mind, because this is the right way forward."
Mm.
And so it was quite a brave, I suppose, move at a time when it was all quite delicate in some
Mhm.
ways. I was one of the first organizations, independent organizations, to set up and start teacher training outside of the universities. I wasn't the first, but I was one of them. Yeah, to be seen to be doing something slightly different than the establishment. Of course, Vidya Mala from Breathworks was really teaching a lot about compassion, and she has become a friend through
Mhm.
our view of the relationship between mindfulness and compassion, really. But that's what we did in Mindfulness UK. We started teaching mindfulness and compassion in a balanced way. I developed a level 4 qualification integrating mindfulness and compassion in professional practice, and latterly the compassionate mindful resilience program. So yeah, lots of different elements just infiltrate, the compassionate elements infiltrate all our work.
And you've developed a new course, haven't you, that is for people who have been diagnosed with cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I've only taught one of those, and it's specifically for people who've either experienced it for themselves at any point in their lives and their carers, because I do think carers have a hard time. And of course, I have heard, oh, sometimes carers have it harder. My experience was not that. I feel like
Mhm.
I had it harder than my carers, but they
Mhm.
still need support. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I've done one, and it is the Compassionate Mindful Resilience Program, which is differentiated, particularly for people with cancer. And just knowing from that very deep place that this works. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I put it to the test in a way that I never really thought I would have to.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you never know where it's going to take you, do you?
No, no.
It's great. You've certainly had a lot of influence, and you mentioned the book,
Mm,
but this might be an opportune moment to mention your new book that you're
mm.
currently writing as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got the working title of Compassionate Mindful Resilience Workbook, and I developed that course, which is a shorter course with shorter practices in 2020, based on my years of experience. And I put it together in particular for health and social care sectors, and have supported many, many people in the last 5 years, and had it really effectively researched throughout with 3 or 4 different universities. And it's now internationally recognized through the International Panel of Mindfulness-Based Courses, who acknowledge courses that are innovative on an international level. So yeah, quite a journey to get to that point, but I feel absolutely thrilled that shorter courses and shorter practices are now being recognized, whereas they haven't been before.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's quite an achievement, really. So
Mm.
well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's given us such a rich sense of your journey, your roots in practice. And I'd like now to shift into how you stepped into teaching. And first question is, who or what most influenced you as a practitioner and as an educator?
Yeah, I'd just like to kind of backpedal a bit and say I don't really like the word teacher. I prefer the
Okay,
word
interesting.
facilitator.
Yes.
Yeah, I find that teacher pupil kind of relationship a bit uneasy for me, actually. So, we're all in this together, and that's how I see it. So, yeah, a lot of people, wonderful people along the way, from listening to talks by the Dalai Lama, of course, and one of my favorite books is Joy, His Holiness Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, and nearer, closer by. So Bendy Wendy, I really feel like I owe so much to her, and she knows it. I've got a very good friend who's a Buddhist nun, Amy Miller, and she has been such a support to me over the years and helped me to really uh, enfold compassion into my life very fully. Of course, to my husband, who's the Buddhist teacher, and it's such a privilege to be able to have easy conversations at home about this kind of thing. Yeah, I just feel very blessed to have had the support, and of my staff, Angie Ward in particular. So yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah. And did it feel like a natural step to go into this role? Did you resist it a little bit at first?
Yeah, again, I can remember thinking I sort of came from through a non-traditional route, having done the practice myself, then bringing that experience to the patients that I was working with and seeing the shifts and the changes, and then setting up my own mindfulness center, physical place, and starting to continue my work one to one, and then realize that I wanted to teach groups, yeah, came from quite a different place. But when I started thinking, well, maybe I should get a qualification in this or do some training, and I started looking around, and there wasn't anything that really seemed to fit the bill. And at the same time, this must have been about 2011. At the same time, people who had no qualifications at all, or hadn't been practicing for more than 4 weeks, or they'd done a weekend, were starting to work in the NHS and in other places where I was really fearful for the people that they were teaching, because you can get this really wrong if you don't assess people well and have a really clear idea about the impact of mindfulness. And so, having looked around and recognized that there wasn't anything and this was going on and that it was going to go on even more, I bleated on about it for a little while, and then I thought, I'm going to do something about it. And that's when I did develop the Integrating Mindfulness and Compassion qualification. And it is a qualification because it's with the Counselling and Psychotherapy Central Awarding Body. It's not just an in-house training. And alongside that, I also bit the bullet and sort of went back some steps and went through Bangor University and did my MBSR teacher training as well. So they were both sort of alongside each other. But it was that strength of feeling that I had that this was going to go horribly wrong if people didn't really understand what it was that they were doing for others. And that's kind of put me in the training role, sort of without me cognitively thinking, right, next year I'm going to become a trainer. He was more
Mm.
driven, he was more of an intuitive drive than anything else.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. And was there something about the secular format that appealed to you in particular?
Yes, there really was. I think it's the accessibility. And because I came from the secular experience and it had such a profound impact on me in my life, it was only latterly that I started to do a deeper dive into Buddhism. So I really strongly believe that keeping the secular aspect of mindfulness has such power, but there is, for me, a real connection to the lineage. It might not come into my actual teaching. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but I've got it in me. And I think people can connect with that on a subtle level, actually. So, yeah, that's how I feel.
So it
Mm.
kind of imbues your practice.
Yeah, it imbues my practice and it imbues my facilitation of groups and also the training, because I feel that people, if they ask me a question, I generally have a sense of what the response should be, but I do make choices. Do I talk about it within the Buddhist context? So I've literally just done a retreat around the four immeasurables of loving kindness, joy, compassion, and equanimity. And so I've just started opening into that for Mindfulness UK. But up until that point, it's been completely secular. So yeah, I came from that place and I stay really true to that because I think it's accessible and engaging, and I don't want to put people off and think I'm trying to brainwash them or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, totally get that.
Mm.
Absolutely. And as a facilitator, do you draw on skills and insights from other careers and life experiences that you've had?
I do, my background again, but also having done a nursing degree. And it was a fabulous course. It was 4 years. It was an RGN combined with a degree. I think it was the second one that was ever run in the country. And we had incredible lecturers. So we had the psychologists from the psychology degree and sociologists from there, and microbiologists and all sorts. So it was kind of a cobbled together degree, but they were real experts, our lecturers, in their fields. And so I feel that that has absolutely inspired me along the way. And really do fall back on what I learnt there and the sort of the skills I got, the listening skills through nursing, and then through my work with patients one-to-one with trauma and abuse and pain, and that opening up and the enabling people to feel they could be safe and vulnerable at the same time. And I feel like I support them in creating a space to do that. So yeah, I think my nursing has been invaluable. And I see that actually the older I get, the more value I place on it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's lovely. And it's really interesting to hear how everything's connected in that way. It
Yeah.
reminds me of that phrase or that word Ubuntu.
Yes.
I am because we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I
Mm.
absolutely love it, and I have a really strong sense of that.
What keeps you feeling inspired or motivated as a facilitator of mindfulness?
I think it's I have a very strong drive to continue in this work because it's an evolving experience for me. I don't feel like I've sort of reached a place where this is it in my own experience of my practice and my relationship to other people in the world. And uh, I get such a lot of satisfaction and the inner glow, a feeling of really contributing to the world, and very much a part for me of this drawing of the line. I remember really clearly thinking, I'm not going to let what's happened to me color and influence as much as I'm able to what I do moving forward. And so being able to contribute to the health and well-being of other people so that they can make empowered choices, and that ripple just goes far and wide. It just makes me smile inside when and not in an egotistical way, just it feels really aligned with the choices that I've made in my life, and I feel very flowing about it. I feel at ease with this work and what I'm doing. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's what keeps me going, this continuous learning and the virtuous cycle of teaching and training and then coming back to me and me continuing to be taught and trained. I
Mhm.
love it.
That's wonderful. I'm sure that'll be an inspiration to a lot of people who are listening as well, especially perhaps those who are thinking about taking this up as a main role in their life. Lovely.
Mm.
So that's great. You've given us a real sense of who you are as a teacher. And now I'd like to dive a little deeper into your teaching philosophy and
Hmm.
your pedagogy. And just like to start by saying that teaching mindfulness is not quite like teaching maths or history, is it?
No.
It's about also how we embody the practice. It's how we show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd really love to hear how you see that role.
Yeah. I feel that often, very often, I have emails pop into my inboxes from organizations and so on saying, can we just buy some scripts of meditations off you, please? And we'll pay you this much or whatever. And I've never once said yes, however tempting it can be, and to,
Mhm.
to send them a bookload of scripts because it's the experience of practice and the transformational qualities that can arise, not always, but can arise through teaching practices to others in that embodied way. And I can put it into words and I can put it into context and talk about the neuroscience and so on, but there's something really magical about having done the work yourself and then teaching others and supporting others in a really open-hearted way that I do think electronic devices like apps and so on doesn't really get to. And so yeah, the embodied experiential practice is what I feel like I bring and what I really encourage all of my participants and students to really embed in their lives before teaching to others. I do see it as a balance. It's not all let's just feel into the space and do whatever feels right. There's a real balance between having a curriculum or a sense of what the theme, the learning theme is for the week or whatever it is for the whole course. But to hold that in one hand and then lightly and with knowledge and intuition and awareness and experience to be able to shift and change and flow in and out of that. So that phrase about shifting from doing to being and back to doing, I think is really important. I mean, I've never been a maths teacher. I don't know. Do maths teachers flow into being a lot of the time? Maybe they do. But yeah, that's what I sense. I also really rely on my practice to keep me steady when maybe things within the group are getting a little agitated or someone's a little distressed or whatever. I bring myself into my body and my groundedness, and that helps to settle everything down. And maybe other teachers don't do that as they're delivering information.
Thank you. So, how would you describe your teaching philosophy or approach, or another way of phrasing this perhaps is, what values underpin your teaching and how do you stay aligned with those? I know you've
Mm.
touched on some of this already, but I wonder if there's some expansion on your philosophy.
Yeah. I think my main philosophy is meeting people where they are, but in a way, it's more than that. It's differentiating. I have a I think it's through experience and having done the work for myself. It's about seeing what people need at any given moment and utilizing all the skills to be able to provide that in a way that they can make use of it and sense of it. And that for me is where the shorter practices, the flexibility, the capacity to adapt is really important, and where the curriculum is helpful, but there's a lot of flex in that for sure. And I find that that really helps. I also have my strong core values, which have become my organizations, but very much about inclusivity, and that is really a thread that runs through everything that we do. So we can plan something, we have a sense of what we're going to do, and then suddenly something completely different presents in front of us, a lot of excitement or whatever it is, maybe some dullness of something, and we have to then shift and change. And I think that comes from really listening to yourself as the person facilitating, and also the knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you see inclusion within mindfulness educational practice.
Yeah. It's sort of discussed a lot, and things are shifting, no question, in the mindfulness world, but it is discussed that there's a certain presentation of people who have been in a position to be able to access mindfulness up until very recently. And really where my interest lies is with people for whom this is not so accessible and readily available, those hard to reach communities, and how we absolutely have to make adaptations. So we can't superimpose this blueprint that works for some onto others. We have to really sit back in a way and do that creation of space, and look at what their needs are and adapt what we teach massively to enable them to see the value of it. So that for me is inclusion in whichever area that we're working in, or that I'm training people to work in, is to have the confidence to really listen and observe and acknowledge the reality of people's lives, and then to meet that in a compassionate way, to teach in a way that, yes, they get what you're talking about and the practices, but it stays, it sticks, if you like, and people want to keep coming back for more. So yeah, that differentiation and inclusion comes in lots of different guises, but it really is the opening of doors, and being flexible and adaptive to different circumstances.
Yeah. Thank you. And on the back of that, could you say a little bit about the different audiences that you do work with?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that we've probably worked in pretty much every sector as greater or lesser extent. So yes, we have had a program for several years where we worked within educational settings. I think we were ahead of our time, and we worked in primary, secondary schools and places, special educational needs environments. And that was really from our own experiences, from that of neurodiversity and so on. So yeah, that adaptation, adaptability, to sort of shift and change what we were teaching. We were actually teaching the teachers to then work with the students, the pupils or whatever, and showing them how to facilitate it. So that was the work we were doing, because they knew the students better than we did. We've also, we work in corporate, so we deliver the Compassionate Mindful Resilience program, for instance, in HSBC. I've worked in healthcare for many, many years. So we've just recently completed a project with the National Association of Primary Care, working in GP surgeries with the employees. And we've worked with the criminal justice system. We taught a lot of judges and police, and yeah, just all over, in and out, foster carers, and yeah. So from really the whole age spectrum, and yeah, that capacity to be able to adapt and flex is just second nature to us, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Great working with a great whole range of different groups. But do you ever encounter resistance, skepticism, disengagement? And
Mhm.
how do you work with that?
Yes, very definitely is the answer. And I do put some things in place to ensure that the people who come are people who want to come. So say we go into an organization, we never just say, right, in the lunch break, everybody's got to come, every employee's got to come to mindfulness session or whatever it is. There's always a choice point, and if they're going on a course, they have to fulfill an assessment process, so they know that what they're becoming engaged with. So it's from both sides, really. I think it's really important that they know what they're letting themselves in for, and we have a sense of whether there's any red flags and or how engaged they are and whether they have time for practice, that sort of thing. So yeah, we put some safeguards in place. We have processes around all of that. And so that's there. But of course, people start the course or doing practice or whatever, and for whatever reason, it's they do disengage. Sometimes it's just something going on in their lives. And I used to be a real cheerleader. So yes, mindfulness is fantastic. Everybody should do it. And if you just persevere, it'll all be grand. But I now see really clearly that the disengagement, the turning away from, that there's a resistance there is because there's a painful part that they don't want to turn towards. There's the suffering aspect, and they maybe are not equipped to do that at the moment. And I have a massive amount more compassion for those people than I used to have because they're just not got the resources or the resilience or the knowledge, the capacity, whatever it is, to be able to do it right now. And that pulling back just shows me that that is there and that's okay. And so I feel like even if they've started a course and then they pull away, I think, well, maybe, I've sown a seed, or they'll come back to it another time, and just being kind to them about it rather than saying, well, you must persevere because you'll break through the wall or whatever. It's like, hey, yeah, now's not the right time, but that's all right.
Yeah, you can't reach everyone. People often come to mindfulness when they're ready, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they do. And even when people think they're ready, and even though we do the preparation of you've got to do this much practice and this is what the course entails, actually the reality of doing it is very different to what the theory is. And so the experience of doing it and actually opening up into not only the conscious mind, but starting to go deeper into the subconscious, it is so painful for some. It's so alien, and our society doesn't support it that well. And so the pulling back is quite natural and understandable. So, yeah, it's an interesting process to observe. And it's, in mindfulness, we talk about being non-judgmental, and that's how I am. This is how it is right now, and then the letting go and seeing them might come back to it at some point.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really lovely. And just to go back a little bit, I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about how you prepare, how you plan for your courses, for your engagement with participants and people in different contexts. For example, and quite a few practitioners who will immerse themselves in a topic, maybe come off the back of a retreat, for example, and feel like they really embody the teachings, and it really helps deepen their sense of presence. But then there's also the practical side of
Mhm.
just writing down your timings and the resources you need. And I wonder if
Mm.
you could say a little bit about how you balance those.
Yeah, it is different types, and depending on the modality, really, I suppose, of delivery. So in my retreats that I run, for instance, I will bring kind of where I am to the retreat. So it feels really authentic to do that. So there's more of an exploration beyond perhaps the teacher training, to sort of, yeah, whet people's appetite maybe for more, to just show up really as to where I am and how I'm feeling. And sometimes they're yoga based, sometimes they're compassion based, sometimes they're Buddhist based, whatever. So there's that. but I think it's actually really quite simple. It's about meeting or recognizing what my needs, and sometimes my needs are about keeping to time, making sure I've got everybody on the register and that sort of thing, and meeting the needs of others, the people that you're engaging with. And so, if you have a strong sense of those two things, there is a possibility to balance it out. And sometimes, as a facilitator, one has to be quite boundaried to enable my needs to be met. And other times you just literally have to let go and, and see that there's these person or people in front of you have greater needs. So let's throw it all out the window and for this session maybe and do what is required here and now. Yeah, it's
So
different.
responsiveness to what you
Yeah.
encounter in front of you.
Yes, and doing that with knowledge and an appreciation of what sort of the downstream effects might be. So if you don't get the all of the course content for that session done, how you as this thing's unfolding, how am I going to do that next time? So there's sometimes quite a lot of thinking going on whilst your heart's quite open and we're letting it flow. And so, yeah, balancing that out can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes, but I think it's really important to recognize that there is just an ebb and flow around any session and to be open to it and not to be really stuck to what you've planned to do, but also not to be really free.
Yeah,
You can't let it all hang out. Yeah, you get a bit unstuck with that, I think.
yes.
Mm.
There's some balance in there, isn't that?
Mhm.
Flexibility, adapting, but also making sure you have some structure that you're working towards. You mentioned that word authenticity, and
Mm.
I would say that has been related to how you also build rapport those you work with. I wonder if you could say a little bit about rapport building.
Yeah, there's a lot of research around the importance of trust and where trust sort of comes from, the building of trust in one-to-one, sort of more therapeutic, not therapy, but therapeutic relationships and with groups and so on. And I think that that does come from the teacher, a facilitator being themselves. And that's what I say in training. I don't want people to be me or to try and take on what I bring. I want them to really be themselves and then to bring in the skills and the tools to enable that to happen so they feel really grounded and connected to themselves and the teaching that they're doing. So, yeah, it's become very important for me. And I think as you get older, you start to recognize a little bit more that everybody has real attributes. And actually, we all have real attributes, but we all have things that we can work on as well. And that's quite a humbling experience. And so, yeah, I think the trust and just being myself on any given day is really important. And that's so I feel very yeah, connected and congruent with that.
Yeah. So you're attuned is another way of putting that. If
Yeah.
you're building attunement and that trusting, safe environment
Yeah.
between yourself and those you're working with. Yeah. Is that a way of
Yeah.
capturing that?
Yeah, and deciding what to share of myself and what not to share of myself. And that again is different at different times and with different people. And it's not a when you're teaching people, it's not about you, it's about them, but equally they want to have a sense of you. And so, you're not as a teacher facilitator, you're not an automaton. It's not,
Mhm.
okay, we're just going to teach these practices in this context and the content and everything will be fine. Having seen so many feedback forms now, what comes through is, oh, the teacher was warm or knowledgeable or that there was a real sense of safety within the group. It felt sense really, and how people feel within the environment that is way more prevalent in feedback than, "Oh, I learned this, and this, and that's really helpful for me." It's the feeling that you can evoke within in that interrelationship, which is really important.
Thank you. I wonder if you have a very strong sense of what you're trying to achieve when you're teaching mindfulness. We know for example, in Buddhism, there's an ultimate goal of enlightenment there
Mhm.
that is really quite front and center. I was just wondering whether you have an aspiration or whether you just want to get people to a place where they can practice. Where do you think you go with that in terms of the longer term vision of what you do?
Mm. Yeah, it's such a good question. I absolutely know I'm not uh, trying to take people to a place of enlightenment. That's not my drive. And I think it's about helping people to find the tools in whatever circumstances they are to be able to look after themselves in whichever capacity they have. And that might be the more mindful regulation of the nervous system. It might be bringing in more kindness, a change of self view, and helping them to recognize themselves as being really valued and valid and have a lot to offer and feel empowered by it. A word that I hear so much, and that for me is what I'm doing. And in particular, using mindfulness and compassion as a real vehicle to get to people, to teach them these practices that otherwise wouldn't be able to reach them. They wouldn't have an opportunity to be able to engage with them. And so, just as an example, one of the people on my teacher training works with women in Ukraine. And for me to know that my teaching, the training that I'm doing with them will help those women, I mean, it's just incredible. Where I couldn't go into Ukraine and do it, or the other places, I really recognize my place in all of this. So yeah, that's what this is all around, really, is helping people to allow themselves to feel the suffering, to feel the vulnerability, to know that that's will give them strength and yeah, the skills to be able to move forward in perhaps a slightly different way that is much more supportive for them.
And that can be a huge, huge life changing thing for people, can't it?
Yeah, can
Yeah.
be. It can be, and sometimes it isn't.
Yeah.
And both are okay.
Yes. Absolutely. And there's a sort of ripple effect there, isn't there, from the work that you
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
teaching so many people and those people working in so many different contexts.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And because I have such a view of my place in the world, it ripples out, but it ripples back, and
Mm.
it's just all interconnected. And that's what I love about it, is that I just feel so connected to the work and the ripple and how it just flows in both directions. It's a beautiful thing.
I'd love to explore a little bit about the theory that you have been developing in your books
Mm,
um, that underpin your particular approach. I wonder if we could just spend even just a few minutes just
mm.
saying a little bit about those aspects.
Yeah, I think the moment that I recognized that I wasn't self-compassionate to myself as I would have been massively compassionate to others through my life was really significant. And then I did start looking at what mindfulness teachers say about mindfulness and how that builds self-compassion just naturally. And of course, there's no question that I feel that creating space and dropping into the moment, that creates opportunities for kindness. But I equally know that if you haven't had your needs met, if you have experienced a dysfunction, whatever that looks like as you're growing up, that you haven't actually been taught the skills and of kindness, of self-compassion, of self-nurture. And there are all sorts of different barriers and blocks and barricades that you can get to. And so my experience has been mindfulness really allowed me to soften and open and let go of those blocks and barriers. And then learning about self compassion gave me a whole other toolbox to be able to work with what was there. And I had to be taught that. And because I wasn't taught it growing up. And in this world where trauma is so prevalent, I think that I'm not alone in that at all. And so I wanted to show the the difference between the two, the mindfulness and compassion, the self-compassion in particular, and how we have to have that strong base, the foundation of mindfulness to keep us steady for when we open up to the self-compassion or the lack of self-compassion, which can be very activating to recognize, I haven't been kind to myself in so many circumstances. I've always put everybody else first. It's just so huge for some people. So I wanted to show that relationship. And so I developed the model, the iceberg model, and then I showed it to a friend of mine, Dr. Trudy Eddington from the City University, and she has worked with mindfulness and compassion in many areas. She's a lecturer, but also she works with patients for many, many years. She's a nurse by background too. And she works with patients with neurological conditions, particularly head trauma. And she said, I can describe exactly the difference that's happening neurologically when you're learning mindfulness compared to when you're learning compassion. And every stage of the model, she said, there's something different neurologically going on. And I was just so excited that day
Mhm.
because it came from my own experience and working with patients who had been traumatized and recognizing that these skills and tools made physiological differences if they were taught well and became enfolded into everyday life. So yeah, it was a really powerful moment for me. And so although mindfulness is imbued with compassion, and within compassion you can be really mindful, they do really interweave and dovetail. But for certain people in society, we don't just compassion doesn't spontaneously arise when we are practicing mindfulness in its fullest form. And that for me is what it is. It might open the door, but yeah, to actually learn different skills. I know it because I felt the discomfort of it. And I'd been practicing meditation by that stage for 25 years,
Mhm.
something like that. So yeah.
And I know some mindfulness experts refer to compassion as a skill and something that can be trained, and others will say it's already natural
Mhm.
innate quality,
Mhm.
or both.
Yes.
How do you conceptualize it as a skill, would you say?
Neurologically speaking, we have the tend and befriend part of our nervous system, of our brain, and that's innate. And that is why we reach out to others, why we naturally are compassionate, generally speaking. If somebody fell down in the street, we would maybe or most likely go and support them in that. We're just automatically compassionate. But the self-compassion isn't always there, because I do think it is something that needs to be modeled or supported and heralded, maybe, which isn't. And I actually think self-compassion is hard to get your head around. I rather like the sense of friendliness, of just becoming friendlier to yourself. And one way I really felt supported in that is one of my very good, even best friend is, I met her in my 20s, and I met her, had a period of my working life as a nurse in a private health club in Chelsea where we worked. My friend was the teacher coordinating all sorts of aerobics classes, this, that, and the other. And she was a strong, kind of independent South African person. She's like my alter ego, a stunt woman. She's also, yeah, a
Mhm.
stunt woman. And I used to imagine when I was learning this, what she would have said to me, what Kim would have said to me in certain situations where this more fierce compassion, although she's like marshmallow inside. And that
Mm.
really helped me with the friendliness aspect. My friends are my advocates, and what would they say if they thought I was actually feeling this about myself? They say soothing things, but also they'd be quite firm with me sometimes,
Mhm.
perhaps. And so I adopted that for myself, and it was a really good way in. So yeah, the friendliness aspect, the kindness, being kind to myself, and not seeing that I was doing in any way other than I reframed a lot. So I didn't feel so guilty that I was putting myself first. I didn't feel like I was letting everybody else down because I was making a stand to say, actually, I just can't go out today. I'm not feeling up to it, whatever it was. Seeing internally thinking, well, that's a real act of kindness. And I'm doing that with the wisdom and the awareness and the groundedness of mindfulness. So it's not self-absorption, which I worried about a lot. And I recognized it wasn't that at all. It was much more about kindness. So yeah, I think reframing and renaming what it is was helpful for me, because self-compassion felt sort of untenable and unreachable for me at some points in my learning.
Thank you for that. I wonder if what's coming across is that there's a bit of a distinction from that natural compassion for others to alleviate their suffering in some way,
Yeah,
but we struggle more with the self-compassion, and that's maybe where a lot of the core training needs to be
yeah,
around that self-compassion aspect.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've given a really lovely picture about your teaching and how you approach it, your facilitation, should I say. Thank you. So I just want to moving towards the end here. There's a theme around looking ahead and the future of mindfulness training, education, however you want to put it.
Mm.
What emerging trends or research in mindfulness education excite you most right now?
I think the move away from what should we call the traditional 8-week programs, the longer practices, and how we can be more creative about how we apply the shorter practices and of both mindfulness and compassion. So there's sort of a couple of themes there, is moving away from the traditional to the shorter, and the differentiation, and getting those researched. I have got, my degree was a science degree, and I have got that part of me that helps. I think the research helps with the validation and helps to, again, let people see that this has got something in it. It's scientific. It's not just woo woo. That there's getting into all sorts of different areas, but it's also about, yeah, taking a step back and seeing this is not just a sticking plaster for things that have already happened. So for people who are suffering extreme mental health issues, for instance, we don't just slap on a bit of mindfulness and hope for the best. For me, the exciting part is really looking at it as preventative medicine, or just prevention. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be the word medicine, but and again, that can be in schools, in offices, in healthcare, massively in healthcare, in it, just everywhere, in a really robust enough way, utilizing it in a way that is going to make a difference and do more good than harm. Because for some, yeah, mindfulness isn't the right answer. So yeah, I think in the education piece, it's around creating space and saying, is what we've done before something that we want to keep on going with? Well, yeah, probably to a point. But the research that's coming out about the 8-week programs, I mean, there's mountains literally of research to support
Mhm.
that. But some people can't get to those 8 weeks. So what does 4 weeks look like? What does 10 minutes of practice look like rather than 45 minutes of practice, for instance? So yeah, that for me is the exciting part, is the fluctuating landscape of mindfulness and compassion. And yeah, just seeing the application can be very different and can be used for prevention rather than cure.
Yeah. Uh, how, working in medical education, I see how mindfulness has found its place in healthcare
Mhm.
and healthcare education. But do you think there's still quite a shift to be made to bring it into healthcare as a
Mm.
preventative
Mhm.
um, option as
Yeah.
opposed to how it is now? If, for example, say 10, 20 years' time, how would you like to see the
Mm.
role mindfulness has within preventative
Mhm.
healthcare?
Yeah. I mean, I think any inroads into supporting people in any way, but in healthcare, are really positive. I have seen and been told about shortcuts, and I don't mean shortcuts through practice, but I really mean shortcuts through safety. And yeah, this is a good program. Let's just chop a bit out and then we'll put it onto a learning management system or something, and anybody can access it. Well, hang on a minute. And that includes patients, not just staff. And it's where are the safeguards here? And I think that that's not really talked about enough. And I don't want to get kind of contracted about this, but if people are doing courses, there's a cumulative effect. There's a real impact on the neurological system, as well as just building the awareness of where people are, and what they've experienced, that needs to be held in a way that is safe. And I'm not saying it all has to be done by a human being. We have our own e-courses, but we have things in place to support people whilst they're on an e-course. And I think that that is important, where there's a human at the end of it to support anybody who's getting into difficulty or whatever. So it can't be carte blanche that one course will fit everything and everybody and make a massive difference. It has to be looked at right from the start all the way through to the very end and beyond, about whether it's safe and applicable, really embedded within the healthcare system, but in a robust and safe way.
Yeah. So it's not superficial. It's something that actually is authentic, but has potential deeper impact.
Yeah, and we talk about, the finances behind all of this. If people become more aware of the choices they make and they bring in self-compassion and maybe that more fierce kindness, you've got to get out walking more. You really don't have to eat that sugar or whatever.
Mhm.
And other choices, so many choices that we can make moment by moment. It would save the healthcare service, well, I mean, in hundreds of billions. Probably, and yeah, that's what we need, rather than so much spent on drugs and all sorts of things that are kind of superimposed when things have got so horribly wrong for people. And, I'm the first to hold my hands up and say the NHS has been absolutely phenomenal for me. But within the system of the incredible care that I've had, I have used my own skills of mindfulness and compassion, and nobody has ever mentioned it to me at any point, apart from a pain consultant who said, I can't really teach you much because you used to teach everybody else, and the person that you would be teaching you trained. It's quite a small area that I live in. So that was the only person where we just had a giggle about it. But yeah, and that for me is quite phenomenal, that you can go through two cancers and actually the words mindfulness and compassion not be mentioned by the most caring, kind community of healthcare providers that I've ever had the delight to meet, really.
So there's some way to go,
I
certainly.
think so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do think so.
Excellent. So let's move into the final section. This is our quick fire reflection, our series of questions that will hopefully provide some beautiful, spontaneous insights.
Okay.
No pressure.
Mhm.
But first of all, what did I not ask that you perhaps wish I had? Is there anything that maybe has went a little bit underexplored in this discussion?
I think I mentioned it a few times in passing, but the trauma-informed way of delivery and what we really have to consider, and that is part of the safeguarding, but to recognise that because of COVID, even I think we've got a collective trauma, but I don't think we really acknowledge how traumatic it was and how hypersensitized and hypervigilant perhaps we have become. And now we know in our cells that this could happen again. It was unbelievable, but we're walking around with that knowledge now that something similar could happen again, and that can create agitation for us. And so knowing how to work in a trauma-informed way is of paramount importance, not only because of COVID, of course, but that heightens the need for it. Complete experiences, and that's how mindfulness, or how and why mindfulness really supported me. And I had to go slow and delicately, and yeah, had some real blockers on the way. But to understand that is profoundly important.
And would you say with that if you're a facilitator of mindfulness educator, is one of the integral aspects of your teacher training, professional development, is to develop your understanding of trauma?
Yes, and it completely is there in everything that we do as an organization. From even what we write on the website is as trauma informed as we possibly can be. And then so that's like the first initial connection people have with us, and then any automations, any emails, anything that comes once you book the course, all the documents, everything that you get has that aspect of being trauma informed to it. And yeah, it's imperative.
Do you see any wider application of mindfulness beyond well-being, beyond trauma? Do you see that actually it can develop other capacities in people?
Yeah, I think it's a starting point for everything. I think for any change, we need to be aware. So mindfulness and compassion is not the answer in per se in in a kind of a more contained way for everybody. But the building of awareness enables people to make other choices about all sorts of things, every single thing, if they have, you know, an ability and the environment to make choices in relationships and the way they live their lives. And globally, you know, there's all the choices about how we are in the world and how we treat the world
Mhm.
and what we do and how we speak, how we listen. I just think it's so impactful, and awareness is key. So yeah, it's just, it's unending. My answer, I could go on
It's a
for
lovely
hours.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's certainly an area that is related to so many different fields. It's almost like you can align it with anything, but awareness being one of the underpinning qualities. So, do you have a favorite poem, favorite reading or quote that resonates with your teaching, with your approach to facilitation?
Yes, I love the Dalai Lama's, His Holiness Dalai Lama's quote, "Be kind whenever possible, it is always possible." And I've got a t-shirt with that on it. I love it so much. And I didn't realize until sort of probably the last 10 years of my life that I have got an opportunity wherever possible to be as kind as it's possible. And I try to be kind.
It certainly comes
Yeah.
across, certainly.
Thank you.
If a student looked back in 20 years, what would you hope they'd say they'd learned from you?
Yeah. I think just that what they had learned helped them to see things differently and to change for themselves. You know, I'm not out to change the world. It's one person at a time. And even if there was a slight shift, that's enough for me, really. For people to be more aware and to be slightly kinder and to have that as the first rung, maybe on a long ladder, perhaps, of change.
Mhm.
That truly is enough.
What advice would you give someone considering becoming a mindfulness educator?
I would say have a look around and find the person or people or organization, whatever it is that just really feels right for you. And yeah, don't get hung up on, you know, oh, this qualification or whatever. It's really a felt sense in some respects. And if they align with sort of your core values, then it feels okay, and intuitively that's all right, then go for it. So yeah, that's what I would say. Listen to yourself.
Thank you. And where can people go to find out more about what you do?
So yeah, they can visit our website, mindfulnessuk.com, and we're on LinkedIn, both myself, Karen Atkinson, and Mindfulness UK. So we have two LinkedIn pages, and you can email info@mindfulnessuk.com, and we're on Facebook and all the other socials as well. LinkedIn is our main social. So it'd be lovely to hear from you, from anybody who's interested in perhaps having a conversation. And we do have on our website links to be able to book in with us to have that conversation for a few minutes if somebody's just thinking about it and wants to just ask some questions about your own personal circumstances or whatever. So really happy always to talk about this.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your story, your insights. It's been a real privilege to talk to you. And I'm sure those listening will take away a huge amount from this rich discussion. So, yeah, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you.
Great. You're welcome.